Welcome students, this is Madhu Kamra from Department of English, Durga Mahavidyalaya, Raipur, to speak on Michel Foucault's seminal essay, What is an Author? This essay appeared sometimes in 1969 and was regarded as a response to Roland Barthes' essay, Death of an Author. Now, you should remember that Michel Foucault was a post-structuralist thinker. Post-structuralism differs from structuralism in the sense that post-structuralism does not believe in textual unity. It establishes disunity as it asserts the point that ideas are derived not from interpretations only, but rather from misinterpretations and biases also. Another thing that is important is that Foucault tried to revolutionize thought system, and at the same time he brought into a new paradigm shift where the interpretation of the text, as Barthes said, initiated putting totally into the hands of the reader. Thereby, you find that the interpretation of the reader becomes more important than that of the expression of an author. So, Foucault heralds a post-authorial culture. This debate was suspended for some time, but later, in the year 1992, another very eminent literary theorist by the name Sean Burke, who brought out a book by the title The Death and the Return of the Author in the year 1992, re-announced the demise of the author. So let us see as to in what respect Barthes and Foucault they differ from each other. Roland Barthes' Death of the Author appeared in the year 1967, and this essay established the fact that the author is related to the external reality. So let us see how this essay begins. At the very outset, he talks about Roland Barthes in an indirect manner, in a suggestive way that the author is dead. And then he establishes his own intent of writing this essay, where he says that he would try to locate how an author appears in a text as a narrative voice, and then he alludes to Beckett's play Waiting for Godot, wherein Beckett had said that what matters who is speaking, and then he recalls his rival Derrida and says that he has assigned the position of an author by shifting the importance to language, and he says that language is something which constructs an author who otherwise is now no longer a speaking figure. Foucault further goes back to the bygone days and says that the author was earlier an immortal figure. Now this hero element of the author is gone and he has become a dead process. Now the reason behind is that the author is no longer a voice that speaks. He is also representative of the different features with which a text is structured, the architectonics of it, and at the same time the intrinsic relationship of the different elements with which it is structured. Then he also talks about text as a site of murder, where he says that the writing subject is deliberately effaced and therefore the author passes into oblivion. Then he also talks about author, who is much more than a proper name. And here he gives the example of Aristotle, who, as we know, is also the author of Poetics, but is also the founder of ontology and is the father of analytics. So students, we now come to the kinds of author, and Foucault puts them into two categories. One is transdiscursive and the other is founders of discursivity. In the first, he says that the author can be one who owns a book or a theory or a tradition, and here you have the example of Aristotle. In the second category, that is founders of discursivity, he talks about such an author who puts forward an idea, a belief or a theory and opens out possibilities for varied and distinct discourses from other writer subjects. Here you have the example of Marx. Marx's philosophy had given room for cultural Marxism, you have scientific Marxism, and you even have biological Marxism. Here Foucault talks about the four author functions and says with the consumption, production, classification and consumption of the text, it is necessary that the author be put into the punitive realm of control. So he says that he is now tied to legal system, and in case he makes any transgressive statements, he can be punished by law. Second, he says that no uniform author function can be seen across discourses. For example, an author of a scientific text appears very different from that of an author who appears in any of the four genres of literature. So he says, when you read a scientific theory, you never question as to who said this or why is this important. But when even a small poem is to be taken up in the class, you are inquisitive to know who has written the text. The third function, he says, is a complex operation where he talks about the criteria laid down by Saint Jerome, who says that author need to be a historical figure, and he should have a relevant style of writing, a uniform style of writing, and whatever he writes should be relevant as far as the expanse or the body of his writing is concerned, and must meet the standard level of quality. Coming to the last point, that is representative of multiple schemes, he says that every reader by his interpretation makes an alter ego of the writing self, the writing subject, and this is open to varied interpretations which is made by the readers. So now let us look into the need for author function. Foucault says that author function is needed to authorize ideas so that ideas become substance for consumption and they are put under the cover of legal control. Second, he says for the operation of discourse so that ideas are structured into text and they are consumed and circulated for readership. Then he talks about author function as classificatory tool, whereby he gives the example of Charles Dickens, his text Oliver Twist, and he says this can be connected to other texts which are written by Charles Dickens, and further he says that Charles Dickens can be easily separated, classified, and at the same time his singularities can be better focused when put by the side of, say, his contemporary like Thomas Hardy. Then last one is to create relatedness, where you find that one single idea, one single text, one single theory of an author can be connected with others so that it can make a wholesome reading and can also establish the discourse in its fullness and wholesomeness. So students, now we come towards the close of the essay where Foucault talks about the outcome of author function. He looks into some elements which may be beneficial to the approach of a text, and there are some reasons why he fears that author function may not do justice to a text. The first, he says, it can create consistency, where you find that the qualitative, the ideological, the stylistic, all these may result into consistency, whereby the meaningful, the newness, the beautiful contained in the text may be unfurled, and a reader can enjoy the text and meet concept of what Wayne Booth has said, the implied author. Then we come to the second point, that is fear of proliferation, where he says that a reader might approach the text with a preconceived idea. He can borrow the concept about the book or the concept about a text or an idea through varied sources, and when he approaches a text, he might have the same mindset and the frame of mind, thereby the author may not be rightly estimated or valued. Coming to the last point, that is danger to comprehension. Foucault says that if an author is individualized or is familiarized largely or with a prejudiced set of mind with biased attitude, the comprehension of a text may not be easily facilitated. So, here he says that the interpretation of the readers, if they are too many, they might affect the assimilation of the text in its right measure. Thank you, students, for listening to me. And you will here find the main ideas which I have explained here. They are recapitulated in the form of a PPT also. So, you will have some slides so that you can refresh whatever I have just now explained to you. Thank you so much.